Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Jason. How's it going?
Pretty good night tonight. It's, trying to enjoy nice weather here because apparently we're going to get soaked on Saturday at Spruce Meadows by the sounds of things.
It does, yeah. Trying to enjoy these last warm days before the deluge kicks in. Curious to see how much rain falls on the weekend. I don't know if you know this, it's the anniversary of the 2013 flood, the 12-year anniversary, and it looks like we're going to get up, what was the number I saw, close to 90 mils of rain?
I remember it well. I remember riding my bike all around, like up and down the pathways there, right by the brand new, at the time, Peace Bridge, and seeing the water just just inches below the bridge deck. And yeah, it's a crazy time for sure. And hopefully none of that happens this year.
Hopefully, eh? Well, the city and the province have done a lot of flood mitigation in the last decade plus to ensure that if that kind of rainfall happens again, we're a bit more prepared for it. So hopefully all that money spent in those projects that have been completed will do what they're supposed to.
All right. Well, anyway, if you are a new listener to our podcast, Scott, tell us all about what the YYC Soccer Podcast is all about.
When we're done talking about the weather, we switch focus and start talking about Calgary soccer. So we discuss soccer at the amateur, collegiate, and professional levels, all with a Calgary-specific lens. We talk about the teams and players from the city's soccer community, including the two professional teams, Cavalry FC and the Calgary Wild. And at this time of year, we always talk about the Calgary-based teams competing in League One Alberta, which is the top men's and women's amateur league.
And this week, we'll be talking about Cavalry and their match at home versus Pacific. We'll also preview the Calgary Wild. They'll be in Ottawa on Saturday. We'll do our usual League One Alberta reviews and previews. And we have an interview this week. Scott, who's our interview with?
Yeah, we chatted with Charles Nana, who's a winger for Foothills' League One men's team. Some listeners may recall we had him briefly on the podcast back in 2023 when we were still pretty new to this. That was an on-site interview right after Foothills had clinched the inaugural League One title, although that year it was just an exhibition season with a limited number of teams. But it was great to catch up with him and talk about how his own career has progressed since then and how the league itself has shown a lot of growth in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think he has kind of a good insight in the sense that he was a regular participant in that very first year, and he's been in it every year since then. So he's definitely had a chance to see it evolve. So yeah, a good chat, and we'll get to that a little bit later on. For our first segment, let's talk about Cavalry FC.
I am Christian Greco-Taylor, and this is the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So Cavalry FC will be hosting Pacific FC at Spruce Meadows on Saturday, 2:30 p.m. kickoff, which is actually a changed time from the original planned kickoff. But the last time these two teams played each other, it was a fairly one-sided affair.
Yeah, it was kind of ugly. Over the years watching these matches, I don't really remember a time where you just saw a team just implode on the field. And I kind of felt like that's what happened to Pacific last time.
Yeah, it was a 4-0 win for Cavalry. I mean, we could obviously talk about the 8-0 win that they got over Valor way back in 2019. But you're right in the sense that you wouldn't expect that kind of implosion from Pacific, who have been a pretty consistently good CPL club for the last 6 years. But yeah, they had a really rough, particularly second half, and Cavalry started to run up the score a little bit. Pacific player Christian Greco-Taylor, who of course is a Calgarian, he was sent off in that match, and Pacific's players were getting really upset with the refereeing decision, and it just seemed to impact their performance.
Cavalry has been on a pretty good run of form overall, so I think they've got the home field advantage and they've been playing well. So I think that puts them in a good position for this match going forward. One thing I'm always curious about is what's the status of injured players? And the way the timing of the press conferences have been, they've not been the most amenable to our recording schedule over the last few weeks, have they?
No, the press conferences are held on Friday mornings, which is when our episodes are released. So we always have to speculate who we think may still be injured or who may be coming back to full fitness. And then we find out after we have our weekly discussion what the case actually is.
I was able to get a quick comment from the club, and I asked about injuries because I said we were recording tonight. And the message I got was no new injuries and some players are coming back. So I guess that's some information. It's not maybe quite so specific, but I guess no new injuries is a good thing because it seems like every week they trot out onto the field or they announce the lineups and we're like, ooh, what happened to a couple of these guys? Why aren't they playing? And then you find out they're injured.
Yeah, there have been some games where Cavalry really had to showcase their depth and give a lot of youngsters playing time simply due to the number of starters who are out injured. Don't know what the case will be this weekend, but overall it's positive to hear from Hannah Wellen, who's the club's media relations rep, that there are no new injuries since that game in Halifax last week. Jason, an interesting prospect is that if Cavalry wins or draws this game, their unbeaten streak will officially reach double digits. I was wondering if you realized that.
No, I didn't. I know it's been quite a long time since they lost, but I don't think I realized it actually did reach all that far back. But yeah, there we go. Last loss was against Ottawa. Is that what you found out?
Yeah, Atletico Ottawa, if you recall, beat Cavalry 3-1 at Spruce Meadows. That game was back on April 26th, believe it or not. They've really turned their fortunes around since then, starting with that 6-0 rout over Edmonton Scottish in the Canadian Championship. Since then, they've beaten York United and Wanderers 2-1 and 3-1. Then they had that 4-0 game we've already mentioned against Pacific. That was followed by a 1-1 draw with Vancouver FC in the Canadian Championship quarterfinal. Then they beat Valor 4-0. Then they drew Forge 1-1. Then they beat York at home 2-1. And then finally, last weekend, they drew Wanderers out in Halifax 1-1. So quite the run of form for Cavalry, scoring a decent amount of goals. They had a couple of 4-0 wins in there and proving themselves incredibly hard to beat.
Yeah, it's been pretty easy to be a fan of this club over the last couple of months. And yeah, I think everybody over at Spruce Meadows will be are likely quite satisfied with how everything's been going, for sure.
For sure. And you have to assume with Pacific's poor form this year, quite out of character for them, that streak for Cavalry will likely continue, but I'm sure Pacific will have something to say about that. But looking at their form, they're 2-2-7, so they've only won 2 of their 11 games this season, and they have had the least productive offense in the CPL with just 8 goals in their 11 games. And defensively, they've struggled, and they have a minus 11 goal differential.
Hi, this is Grace Doherty, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, Scott, let's move over and talk about Calgary Wild. They play on Saturday at noon in Ottawa. They're playing the Rapid. The match will be on TSN. And yeah, this is a match between two clubs which are pretty much neck and neck in the table right now.
That's putting it mildly. Hey, they actually they have an identical record at the moment. Calgary and Ottawa both are on a 3-3-2 record. Ottawa is ahead of Calgary in the standings simply because of a better goal differential. And obviously, the only other time these two teams have played each other, it was the Calgary Wild's home opener at McMahon Stadium, and that was a goalless draw. So I'm predicting either another goalless draw or maybe a 1-1 draw, but it's going to be a very close battle either way.
Yeah, it would be shocking if it was not close, right? These teams just seem to be at so many levels just very similar. So I didn't realize that it's Delaney Pridham, right? She's got 8 goals. Is that right? That's definitely a player to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. From Ottawa, Delaney Pridham leads the league in scoring by some distance with 8 goals. She actually scored the Northern Super League's first hat trick in the Rapids win over AFC Toronto a few weeks ago. But they have, as a club, struggled since then. I noticed that they are coming off of 2 recent defeats, including a 2-1 home loss to Montreal last Saturday and a 2-1 loss to Halifax on June 10th.
And when you talk about the Wild's recent form, they just came off that loss last weekend to AFC Toronto, where it finally snapped their unbeaten streak at home. So yeah, they're looking to rebound here, and I wouldn't say this is necessarily a specifically extra important game, but one thing about this match is there's an international break after this match. So I think you always want to kind of go out on those breaks on a little bit of a high, so you're not stewing for a couple weeks, which is what could happen if you are not happy with your performance. So.
Hey, y'all, this is Charles Nana, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, over to League One Alberta. As usual, there was a game, or I guess the two games on Tuesday evening. Foothills taking on Callies at Broadview. On the women's side, this was a pretty close match. Foothills won 1-0 thanks to an own goal scored by a Callies player in the 33rd minute. But on the men's side, this game was much more one-sided.
Foothills had the big victory, 5-0 over Callies United. So a big result for them. I think they had 5 different goal scorers for each of their 5 goals.
Yeah, you've recorded here Jamie Nicholson, Robert Woodruff Brown, who's been getting on the score sheet quite a lot, it seems. Our interview guest this week, Charles Nana, Amadeo Chamoun, and then Sine Hale, who's another name we've seen in the scoring quite a bit this season.
Yeah, so obviously a big win for Foothills. And yeah, maybe this is a good time to segue into our interview with Charles Nana. It was good to catch up with him again. As you mentioned in the first segment, we did a brief on-field interview with him in 2023. It was the championship match. It was at Broadview, and Foothills won that match. And I believe he scored 2 goals in that game. And I think did they award an MVP in that match? Anyway, I remember he was pretty much the best player on the field. That's what I remember.
I remember that as well. And you're right. I believe he scored 2 goals, one of which I believe was a penalty. But yeah, great time to segue into that interview. So let's run that now. I'd like to welcome Charles Nana to the podcast. Charles has appeared briefly on our podcast once before, back in 2023. And we're excited to have him back. He's a winger for Foothills League One Alberta men's team. Charles, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So it's been a while since we last chatted with you, which was right after Foothills had won the inaugural League One Alberta title, although that was just the exhibition season. I think we're still very new in the league, but can we start by describing a bit of your background, your playing career? And we know that you've been playing your university soccer out in Langley for Trinity Western.
I guess I moved to Canada when I was 6 years old in 2008, and I initially started playing for NSD, but obviously NSD ended up folding, so I needed a club. I went to Southwest for a bit, didn't really feel like it was the right fit, and I ended up joining Foothills. And I've been playing at Foothills since I think I was 12, honestly. It's been a very long time. Yeah, I grew up playing Foothills. My team was pretty good. We won provincials a couple of times. We ended up being able to win nationals on our 3rd try. So yeah, and then after that, it was kind of I had to choose between a university and Trinity Western to seem like the right fit for me and my family. I ended up going out there, and ever since then, I've also been playing League One or just U23s before League One for Foothills. I've been on the team for a while, so.
Okay, what age group are you? What Foothills team are you on?
I was on the O2s, Summit O2.
So, yeah, we know you've been playing for Foothills' League One team basically since the start. So can you maybe speak about the evolution of the league? Obviously, there's a lot more teams now. What kind of growth have you seen within the division, and how has it maybe become more competitive, and how has the level changed since the starting year?
There's been a very big growth because obviously before, Foothills used to have to play USL League 2 to get some competitive games. So we had to travel to the States and stuff like that because there's not enough teams that were competitive at this age group. And so ever since then, we started the first year, League One. There's actually some pretty good competition in there too. There's I would say 3 really good teams. We ended up taking it that year, and then ever since then, like last year, the number of teams, like the teams just got better, and the number of teams increased. And this year is way more competitive. Like right now, you can't really tell who's gonna win it all because we're sitting in 3rd right now, and the point difference from like first to like fifth is maybe 5 points. So it's a very competitive league this year, and it's great to see, honestly.
We've definitely been following along, and there's a lot of, you see the team in first drop down to second, and then the team in third wins, and then all of a sudden they're in the race for first place as well. It's been great to see that level of competition. How would you rate your own performances this so far? I watched one of your games against Cavalry U21s, which you guys won. You had a really good battle going on with Michael Harms in the first half of that match. I mean, as kind of a veteran of League One, I mean, how do you feel you're doing personally? You must feel like one of the leaders in your group.
Yeah, no, obviously we have a new coach, so the system's changed and stuff. So it's not kind of like going back to what I know. It's actually a very new experience for me this year. But yeah, thankfully I've played at the level for a couple of years now, so I'm kind of used to it, and it is a bit easier for me to settle in even with the new coach. And I found it honestly very enjoyable playing in Calgary for possibly my last year. So I found it enjoyable playing in Calgary. Yeah, no, adapting to the level was good. I feel like I've done well so far. Helped the team scored a few goals myself. So I think I'm providing what I need to provide for my team so far this season, and I just hope it keeps going that way.
We always ask our guests to play this question, but what would you say the team's goals are for the season? Like, is a championship what Foothills is gearing for?
Yeah, we've always been a championship team. Like even before League One, before the U23 level, even at youth, we always it was either championship or I don't know why you're on the team. So yeah, when coach built this team, he built this team with one goal in mind, and it was to win the league and also end up winning the final. So I mean, we're still on the right track for that, even though we've had a couple of hiccups. We're still on the track for possibly winning the whole thing. So that's our goal, and it's not going to change, honestly.
Now, I mentioned that you also play your university soccer for Trinity Western. Are you going to be playing there again in the fall? Or is that your fifth year with the team? Yeah.
Yeah, so I have a year of eligibility left, and I took a couple of classes last semester because I had some other stuff going on in football. And yeah, so I have a couple classes left to take, and so I will be playing my last semester there. I had a good year with the team last year. We did lose a lot of people, so it's kind of good to go help out a little bit, being an older guy and just kind of stabilize the attack for us. So I'm happy that I'll be able to help the team, and hopefully you can be successful this year.
Looking ahead, I wanted to ask what your goals and aspirations are, not necessarily this year, but longer term. I mean, I was curious if the CPL is on your radar, or have you had much interest from clubs in the past, and is that the path that you want to go down?
CPL would obviously be a very good shout. This past year, I got asked by a couple teams to come and try out. I went to one tryout, didn't end up working, unfortunately. But no, the CPL would definitely be a good path. I also wouldn't be against moving abroad. Honestly, just any opportunity that's good gives me good living conditions and comfortability where I can just focus on my football, focus on improving is honestly what I'm looking for. And if the CPL can offer that for me, then yeah, I'd love to play in the CPL.
How big is the gap, would you say, between League One Alberta or even U Sports and CPL, having trained with or tried out with some clubs?
I wouldn't say the gap is necessarily an ability thing. The gap is more of a consistency thing. So the gap is really just the stuff that like we do necessarily that we're allowed to kind of mess up. Let's say they're not really allowed to mess up. So it's more like you have to be consistently at a certain level. And I think a lot more players than we think could play at that level if they just focused and trained more, because it's really not the ability difference isn't that big. It's really just a consistency of certain aspects of the game that have to be there that aren't there for players in our league, unfortunately. And that's probably what I would say. But ability wise, I think we're right there.
For sure.
Like right now, when you've got League One and you've got the CPL, Canada still kind of is lacking something sort of in between that, where because with the League One right now, like the season's short, like do you feel like there is sort of a need for something that another sort of league where you could be in a professional environment, full-time training? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, potentially like maybe like a CPL 2 or something where it's like maybe some of the better League One players compete in that league. The only issue with that is a lot of the better League One players go to school at the same time. So you kind of have to find people that are like either not going to school or done with school and still want to play. So that's a smaller pool of players in Canada, that would be the biggest issue. But yeah, it would definitely be good for a smoother transition into the CPL, because a lot of the players that play League One and made it into the CPL actually do very well in that league. So it does show that like League One players are more oftentimes good enough to play in the CPL. So maybe if there's like a smoother transition or some way of getting more League One players into the CPL and even U Sports, it would honestly maybe benefit the league and just benefit Canada soccer in general.
Yeah, I think something along the lines of like MLS Next Pro, right? We've seen some players move from that league to excel with CPL clubs, but there's not that much exposure to that league for Canadians per se.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We did want to ask you, who's the toughest player that you've had to play against, and that could be in either U Sports, Canada West, or in League One, or any other, like maybe a tournament or something. Does anybody kind of come to mind immediately?
Like, how long of a time frame do I have? Like, how long ago can we have been?
Oh, as long back as you want. If someone you played against when you were younger has gone on to huge things, we'd love to hear about that.
I would say he actually plays League One Alberta right now. Plays for BTB, David Doe. I remember back in the day when I was a little, because he's a year older than me, so when I was a little younger than him, I remember I had one really good game against him. So my next couple games, I thought, surely I got this. And no, he's a very good defender. I think David Doe honestly put up the biggest challenge I've ever come up against for sure.
Interesting. Yeah, he was with FC Edmonton back in 2019, I recall. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you want to add in? Anything you want to mention? Any shout outs? Any other comments you want to make?
Shout outs? Not really. No, just honestly, just keep an eye out. League One Alberta this year is very competitive league, and just keep watching. It's very interesting, and we don't know who's gonna come out on top yet. So that's all I really have to say.
Okay, well, thanks again to Charles for doing the interview. We appreciate it. I kind of enjoyed listening to his perspective about, being in the league for 3 years and seeing how it's changed. And I think we all kind of expect and know that how it's evolved and improved, but he's got the real firsthand experience that would be able to truly appreciate that.
Absolutely. He's technically one of the veterans in this league. I really liked hearing his perspective on, that gap that still exists between the League One system and the professional level. Because I do think he's been one of those League One stars who's been knocking on the door of the CPL for the last few seasons. And if there was just one more transitional step, it would really suit someone like him and maybe give him a little bit of a developmental boost to reach that level that he's striving for. But a great interview. And yeah, thanks to Charles for coming on again.
Scott, when we talk about the whole idea of, a level between the CPL and say League One, the new guy in charge of the CPL is Australian. And I think actually, like, there may be some advantage to looking to what they've done there. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but I found out a little bit about this when I was actually down there, is that they've had their A League and then they've had their regional leagues, like the state leagues. But starting this fall, they're going to have a second division. And how they're going to do their second division is they're not creating a bunch of new teams. They're going to actually take the strongest teams from each of the individual state leagues. They've applied to go into this. So it's not even so much about teams that are necessarily winning per se, but the teams that are the most professional, most financed, most supported, like the sort of the creme de la creme of those state leagues. They're putting together a league, and then they're going to play each other, and it's going to be like a national league, and it's second division. So basically that would be the equivalent of, say, I'm just making this up. If you took, Foothills and Blizzard and BTB, and then took TSS Rovers out of BC, and then, I don't know, like
Vaughan, Missouri, or
Vaughan, Missouri, and Woodbridge Strikers, and then AS Blainville. Like, just take like the top 2 or 3 teams out of each of the regional leagues and have them play each other. So I don't know if we'll see that, but that might be a solution that might potentially work.
Yeah, interesting concept. Hey, I think the only thing is, and I mean it's the case in Australia as well, it's the feasibility of how much travel that would involve when you start cherry picking teams from the regional leagues. And if you think about, the economics of that setup here, where you've got a BC team traveling over to Quebec, I don't know, but
Yeah.
it does seem like there is just that. If like the CPL had a second division, it would be a really good fit for a lot of players. Like a Cavalry example I thought of was Ethan Beckford, right? Like he seemed to struggle in the CPL 2 or 3 seasons ago, but he was smashing the goals in League One Ontario, right? So it just seemed like maybe there was just a bit bigger of a gap than some of us expected between the best of the best in League One and the ability to compete in CPL.
Well, if you look at our list of guests we've had over the last couple of years, I could name you a whole bunch of players that probably fall into that category where they're just knocking at the door of the CPL, but it just hasn't quite worked out. You think about Adam Huskic, Moel Gandor, Caden Rogozinski.
Right.
I'm sure there's more.
Yeah, fair enough.
Well, let's get back and talk about League One. There was one other matchup on Tuesday, and that was Villains against Cavalry U21.
Yeah, I was interested to see what the final score in this one would be. I was expecting a Cavalry win. Villains has really struggled in League One this season. They've lost a lot of games by heavy margins and haven't been able to score many goals. Ultimately, this one finished 5-1 for Cavalry with a hat trick from Owen Antoniuk and then a brace from Ben Zamola.
Segueing over and talking about Friday, Cavs U21 are going to be back in action. They're going to be playing Rangers over at Weber Athletic Park on Friday evening.
Yeah, this one should be a closer battle. Rangers, which, as we know, has a lot of players from Mount Royal University. They're 4th place at the moment with 13 points. A win from Cavalry, who are down in 7th place, that would put them equal on points. They're on 10 at the moment. So curious to see how this one shapes up.
And a couple other matchups here in Calgary on Friday evening. Callies will play Scottish over at the West Dome.
And then Blizzard will be playing BTB, and we see that game is taking place at the Soccer Center. So 2 weeks in a row, we see games held at the Calgary Soccer Center. And that should be a really good one, right? That's top of the table clash. Yeah, that's first against second.
Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can have this podcast downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other podcasting platforms. Check out our website at yYCsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archive and find other options to listen, including our YouTube channel. We also have links to buy Scott's book, Here Come the Cavalry. It's all about Calgary's pro soccer history. You can leave a question or comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media, such as Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky, where our username is YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.